And hello there guys, Cedar Mangaka here, coming to you with catching up on the Worlds Recap series that I've been doing. Just to briefly touch on some of the games we saw yesterday, this is going to be focusing on the Group C stages, which were played out yesterday from the time of the recording of this video. I got caught up in doing a couple of other side projects of mine, so forgive me for this one coming out late. Not really a whole lot to talk about as far as these games go, because we just had two pretty strong teams with SKT and E2G against one okay team and then one really weak team in the form of H2K and Bangkok Titans respectively. There's really not a whole lot of insights to pick up from as far as like how the meta is going, and we're going to be once again kind of focusing on wrapping up the how this group stage went out and looking forward to the two advancing teams from this group stage in the later part of the World Championship. So let's start with the first game of this day, which was the rematch between SK Telecom and Edward Gaming. So allow me to pull this up. And turn on, here we go. So move that just a hair. So looking at this game, we SKT is on blue side, so we get to see what kind of picks and bans they're prioritizing on this side, and they are taking away the Lulu from EDG. They like to play around Deft in the bottom lane, so denying them that pick is very important when it comes to playing against EDG. And they go for Rek'Sai and Annie. Now they let Deft's Kalista through again. They first pick Elise in this game and let Kalista have, or let Def have Kalista. It's a champion that he is very successful on. He hasn't had such a good time with it at the World Championship, in largely part because KT keeps on using this Ryze mid lane pick with Faker to give them some point and click CC to lock Kalista down and burst them. And so we see a very similar style coming out of KT for this game. We have a Bruiser in the top lane. This time it's Darius instead of Fiora, so it's a little more tanky, a little less burst duel kind of a thing going on. We have Ryze for Faker in the mid lane and aggressive jungler for Bangi. And then Bang actually shows up with the Tristana in this game, and Wolf picks out a Morgana for himself. So these are picks that SK Telecom has shown at one point or another in time, but they're kind of just showing that they have these in mind, and really it's a great counter draft system to them. Darius, even though he does get beaten up by the Gnar in lane, just seems to overall just be an incredibly strong pick. It works out really well for these guys. Amazing J has a difficult time in this game. He gets bullied on quite a bit. And then we see the Morgana acting as a counter pick to deal with the Twisted Fate, and the Thresh coming through to deny them some of that pick potential. And Clearlove goes on to his Gragas because his Rek'Sai is banned. And so SKT seems to have dealt with EDG so far in the draft phase. And in this game, I mean, Marn has a fantastic game. He goes off. Amazing J is really kind of being shown up where he's not being so self-sufficient against this level of competition at World so far. It's another dominant game from SKT, which, given the fact that this is a scaling composition that they're working with the Tristana in the bottom lane, with the Ryze in the mid lane, and yet they're beating EDG early on in these fights, it's a very troubling sign. Now, there is one thing to know in this game. It's that there is some, I find, questionable builds from Pawn. He builds a Rod of Ages first. I don't agree with that. I see that he's trying to get more spell rotations off in these team fights that are going to be dragged out, but you're going for this Twisted Fate. You're trying to push the Ryze into lane. You're trying to go get your side lane snowballing so that you can get ahead. And he doesn't commit to that playstyle. I think that's one reason why EDG fails so particularly hard. Shoutouts to Faker for getting the 1v1 on Pawn in the mid lane. Revenge for all those other times, so something like that. It's a very dominant game from SKT. It's a very macro punishing game from SKT. They played this out incredibly well. Then we're going to skip over most of the Bangkok Titans games, except for the ones that are really worth talking about. And so we're not going to talk about H2K versus Bangkok Titans. It's really whatever. But one game that we are going to talk about with the Bangkok Titans is their game against EDG, because the theme of this Worlds, if you haven't already picked up on it, is that China is not showing up in the way that we anticipated it. They've purchased a lot of elite level Korean talent. They've looked strong mechanically. They've had, several teams at the top level have shown great understanding of the lane swap, and we're not seeing these things happen at this tournament for whatever reason, whether it's just the best of one format, where the Chinese teams haven't prepared so well, given like citing a poor scrim culture going on. So they're coming in unprepared. They only have one game to show up, and they make these huge issues in the game, and they don't realize what mistakes they're making and coming back from it. It seems like across the board that this could be a year where, except for EDG, the other two Chinese teams won't be getting out of the group stage, whereas before in every other Worlds, every single Chinese team got through the round of 8. So this is quite an important year. Talking about this game, Bangkok Titans legitimately outplay EDG for the first 20 or so minutes. There's some Clear Love is really showing how just focused EDG are on ganking Def. Like, he is just constantly on that side of the map. He's constantly leaving Amazing J alone. It's something that SKT exploited in their game, and something that the Bangkok Titans were even able to exploit with some smart counter ganks. There's these mechanical little plays that show up. Moss in this game, the support player, had a very good roaming game. He always showed up at the right place at the right time, stopping a lot of the all-in plays trying to come out from EDG in their lineup. And for a while, Bangkok Titans had a convincing lead over EDG and were even outperforming them, which is concerning given the fact that EDG has been the most dominant team over the course of the last two splits in China. They had a couple of issues coming in the summer playoffs, which would then be resoundingly defeated by LGG as they began their rise. But, up until that point, they were an incredibly strong team, incredibly dominant team in the region. So this is very concerning, that the fact that they're making these mistakes in the early game, and they're even capable of being outplayed by a team as weak as the Bangkok Titans. So again, this is another day though where we're dealing with these Super Day-esque formats where a team have 3 different games with 3 different teams that they haven't prepared for, and so they might focus really hard on the important matchup and then let the other one slide. So who knows how much research that they're doing in there. But a team with like EDG that comes from a region like China, which has just always been team fighting, always had really great team fights at the upper echelons, should not be losing in this way to Bangkok Titans. And so it's a very concerning thing to consider for EDG's prospects moving on in the future. And then let's go ahead and talk about the next important game on this one. And EDG bring this game back, by the way, with a very clever brush bait. Bangkok Titans sweep a brush. They have a pink in it, so they think it's safe. They think that EDG doesn't know that they are there, but there's a ward outside of it, outside the pink brush range, and so EDG see them stacking on up. EDG cleverly bait them into a fight in the jungle, and it's a complete ace. And then once EDG win that team fight, they just begin to pull it on back and completely, just control the game from there. So it's a very smart play from EDG to get back into this one. So that's the last thing to note on that particular one. Let's look at H2K versus SK Telecom. So this one is a particular game to note because Ryu shows up with a Twisted Fate. He does a really good job with it, and a couple other things. This is Easy Hoon's one of his games. I believe he played 2. He plays in this game, so we don't see the Ryu versus Faker rematch, if you will. And because of this, we see a different kind of champion come out in the mid lane with the Karthus, and he has a very good performance on that one. And we also see another element which we talked about earlier when it came to the top lane, namely the Renekton versus Darius matchup. So when we last saw this matchup, it was Marin played the Renekton into Amazing J's Darius, and he absolutely crushed him. He developed a huge CS lead. He was killing him in lane solo several times. It seemed like Renekton was a really good counterpick into the Darius. We don't see that in this game. Now, Odoamne, while he's no Marin, he's nothing like Someday, those kind of top laners, he's still a very good top laner in his own right, and he performed well against both Amazing J and Marin in this tournament. He did well in this tournament. But we don't see the CS lead generate, and so that leads me to believe that, okay, maybe it's not as, is it Marin on Renekton that's the powerful thing than Darius? Does he just know how to crush that matchup? We have to consider the lane swap in that other game between SKT and EDG, where he had a huge advantage from that, was able to zone Amazing J off of that, and then he just knew how to crush his advantage after being given one. So there are all those things to consider where Renekton, while he can be picked into Darius, just doesn't seem to completely obliterate him in lane, at least based on these two very different results coming on in across 2 different players. And H2K they do okay. They get a couple picks going on a little bit early, but it's really nothing too special to write home about. It's harder for them to really make plays in this game just because there is the Karthus ult that they always have to worry about. And that's another thing to consider in this matchup in the top lane that we discussed, where it's hard to just all in the Darius when the Karthus can just immediately join the fight in here. SKT, they do go for a heavy diver in the game on the bottom lane, but HTK are able to turn that around. And, you know, they match up with a couple of really good cross-map plays, get some objectives, but eventually SKT just completely, once again, overtakes this game. They're looking as the strongest team in this tournament. So, and then the last thing to talk about would be the game between H2K and EDG, because we have to talk about EDG struggled against the Bangkok Titans. So, you know, what are the odds that, you know, H2K could force a tiebreaker between themselves and EDG? That was something that was, you know, plausible to consider at the time. So EDG do take this game. They do get the Lulu on pawn, and so that means that they can do Def for Jinx. And then they also bring out the Tahm Kench in this game, and it really shows to be a really strong pick. It's, you know, I think Mako trolled a little bit, like he delivered. No, that was a different game. Excuse me. I'm thinking the wrong one. There's been a couple Tahm Kench games that, you know, I remember the champions on the other side. We see the Fiora come out here in the matchup against the Malphite, and Odoamne, he, you know, just crushes Amazing J in lane. He's generating a huge CS lead for himself, but the H2K don't snowball that. They don't play with that. They don't punish with that and take over the game with this Fiora, really kind of showing that they're not really aware of their win conditions, of what they need to be doing, and it gets to a point where Amazing J just has too much armor for Odoamne to deal with without any armor penetration, which he hasn't built up yet, prioritizing the Ravenous Hydra, and then the Essence Reaver. Not a fan of that item. Odoamne, please no. Ryu, as you can see, just doesn't really do a whole lot in this game. No kills, no assists. Pawn really controlling him with the Lulu in this game. Clearlove going 0-0-9 on the Gragas. Def 6-0-3. I mean, EDG, for a while, it's kind of close. Like, there was a, you know, it was very much standoffish. H2K having some little objective leads here and there. But then, you know, it all goes to crap when Hjarnan and Kasing, in particular, overextending, chasing these engages, and it just blows right up in their face. I mean, it's like Hjarnan's flashing over Jinx traps to try and keep chasing the enemy team. They're grouping, you know, he's doing this in the jungle, so they're grouping into a corridor, which you don't do against a Malphite. Kasing is going one way, chasing EDG, while Deft is on his own. Then he flashes back to try and hit Deft, and Tibbers misses. So a lot of mechanical misplays coming from this bottom lane, and EDG really snowballing their lead out of the bottom lane, playing around Deft as usual while leaving Amazing J up to himself. And then H2K don't do anything with Amazing J being stranded, and don't snowball Odoamne. And that's really where H2K fail in this game, and why EDG get out of groups in second place. So, and then the last match was SKT versus Bangkok Titans. It was like a pretty fun show. I mean, it was what it was, and SKT lead this group undefeated. And so now with the couple games that we decided to talk about, I decided to talk about. You guys really weren't part of this conversation, so sorry. Out of the way, let's just kind of go over the things that we learned in this group stage and how the narratives are developing within this stage. SKT, they're looking as strong as ever, and they seem to have a good handle on EDG in both of their games. Even, you know, there was about a week in between them, and EDG had time to come back and prepare. We don't know if EDG was, you know, holding a couple picks back. They try and shake things like up just a little bit, but it doesn't seem like it's going all too well for them. SKT having a really good read on EDG and looking really unstoppable with very little resistance in their games being, you know, seen. EDG's those weren't really competitive games. If they were, it lasted for about the first 10 minutes, and then once SKT had an advantage, they completely just took the game in their favor, closed it out incredibly fast. And considering that these two are basically like the remaining favorites of the tournament after the events of Group D today, and that's coming into the tournament. Seeing it being so lopsided, it really seems like SKT has the World Championship, or could potentially have the World Championship in the bag. Now, again, we don't know if EDG is holding things back, if they're just like, we can beat Bangkok Titans, we can beat H2K, we don't need the first place thing. So, or maybe they had a bad day as far as like preparation goes, as far as, performance level. I mean, they struggled against Bangkok Titans. Something internal was going on with EDG. There is going to be some time for them to regroup and come back. They're going to have a quarterfinal matchup, a semifinal matchup, and then, if they go all that way, they'll meet SKT in the final. We'll see if other teams are picking up on what SKT is doing EDG, making sure they don't have the Lulu, preventing them from snowballing with Deft in the bottom lane, and play off of that, as well as targeting Amazing J in the top lane. One thing that we also kind of saw with SKT is that Marn can be a little aggressive when he gets ahead and be punished by Global, in both the EDG game and in the game against H2K. The ganks up into the top side by the Twisted Fate resulted in Marn dying because he aggresses to go for these trades, and so that is something that looks like some teams could look to punish SK Telecom with. But at this point, you really kind of have to start asking the question of who is going to be the team to stop SK Telecom. Now, we can't really speculate on this until all the teams have been considered. We can talk about who's qualified now, but we might as well save this conversation until both Group D is already wrapped up at the time of filming this video, but I'll talk about that in the next video I make and post. And then Group B, we have to wait for Group B to finish up to see how those results play out and who could be matched up with who, as well as the draw. Once Group B finishes up, we'll have the draw, and we'll be able to kind of speculate on what can happen in those games. So thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video. I know it's a little shorter than the other ones I've done, but again, not particularly an interesting group. We're kind of learning these things. Not a lot of new developments have been happening, but there are a couple insights to draw from it. So thank you guys so much for watching this. This is Cedar Mangaka signing out.